Hi, hello, my name is Gomer Joseph. I hope you've all been having a great day so far. Welcome back to another True Crime Tuesdays video. If you are new, I welcome you. Now, for those of you who are not new, I'm pretty sure that you noticed something pretty different. Something is just not like the other videos. Well, I am using a new camera, specifically, before this video I would be recording from my computer, but since I have this new phone, I just decided, you know what, maybe I should go ahead and use this camera on my phone, and it seems to be much clearer. I don't feel like I am recording something straight out of 2008 and 2009, so from now on I will be recording from this phone. Now let's get back to the topic on hand. Today, I'll be discussing the notorious life of Frank Lucas, which is part of my Thug Life miniseries. The name Frank Lucas wasn't really new to me. When I first heard about Frank Lucas, it was because of the American Gangster movie back in the late 2000s, where Denzel Washington played him. Frank's life was definitely messy, and he was definitely going after a life filled with wealth and power. Sadly for Frank, those riches that he worked so hard to get all went away. Now, I encourage you all to do your own research with this case and not just look at my video for all of the information. Here we go. Frank Lucas was born on September 9th of 1930 in LaGrange, North Carolina, to parents Fred and Mahalie Lucas. Now, after he was born, sometime after Frank was born, he grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina. Let's go ahead and keep this in mind. This is the South, and Frank was born in the 30s. He was growing up in the 30s and 40s, where he and plenty of other Black people were experiencing a lot of racism. For example, there is this one night where Frank had this cousin who was 12 years old. Now, I want you to go ahead and keep this in mind as I continue to discuss this story. Frank has a 12-year-old cousin, and again, this is the South. The KKK were sadly doing their thing, and they get a hold of Frank's cousin, then proceed to brutally and savagely take the life of Frank's 12-year-old cousin. One reason that the KKK took his life was because, clearly he did not look like them, but another reason was that this 12-year-old cousin supposedly looked at a white lady. I don't know what is with these stories of little Black boys losing their lives to these racist demons just for looking at white ladies, or just for, looking the same direction as a white lady. Like, on top of that, that's clearly no reason to take someone out, especially the life of a child. Frank, who was a child himself, when he witnessed what happened to his cousin, was clearly traumatized. You can call it PTSD or whatever, but Frank explains that after this tragedy, his life went down the wrong path. After this event, Frank would get involved in petty crime to the point where he fought his boss. Now, Frank didn't just decide to go ahead and pick a fight with his boss. Here is the reason why. So in 1948, Frank is 18 at this point, and he has had an affair with his boss's daughter. The boss finds out, and he clearly was not pleased to find out that his daughter was sleeping around with his employee. He confronts Frank about it. This confrontation begins to get heated. Then they begin to fight. Frank, this fight went to the point where Frank proceeded to get a hold of a pipe and whacked his boss unconscious with the pipe. That's not even the worst part. Frank would proceed to steal $400 from his boss, then set the place on fire. There's no doubt about it. Frank committed a few crimes. He would be facing assault charges, robbery charges, and arson charges. So, of course, if he gets caught, then he is going to jail. But it seems like he was able to avoid jail time because he left his hometown in the South and moved to New York City, Harlem to be specific. He's in this new town. You would think that he is here to have a fresh new start, to go ahead and leave the crime life behind him. But again, this is the Thug Life miniseries. There is no, little redemption for Frank at this point. He is still committing crime, even more crime than he was committing back at home. While Frank was in Harlem, he would be robbing people. So suddenly, Frank thought to himself, why rob jewelry when I can buy it myself? Sure, he wouldn't be stealing jewelry, but he also wouldn't be buying it either. He would not be buying, no, he would be buying it, but he wouldn't be buying it with hard-earned cash. Instead, he decided to be able to afford buying jewelry by drug dealing, heroin to be exact. At the time, Harlem began to be one of the biggest cities for drug dealing, and Frank took advantage of that. Once he did, he was able to make millions off of dealing drugs. As he continues to earn millions from this quote-unquote career choice of his, he, begins to have this reputation, an infamous reputation, and as it grows, he is noticed by top crime lord Bumpy Johnson, who pretty much takes Frank under his wing. In 1968, Bumpy suddenly passed away of a heart attack, and after his death, Frank pretty much took over and began taking out older crime lords in extreme violent ways because he wanted what they had, and they weren't just going to go ahead and give it willingly, so he had to go ahead and take what was theirs and take what he felt he deserved. This life of crime that Frank was living soon became a family affair. His brothers and nephews would get involved with this criminal lifestyle and were known as the Country Boys. Now, the Country Boys were pretty much running things in New Jersey. So while Frank is in New York doing his thing and his family is doing their thing in New Jersey, Frank decides that he wants to give his customers the good stuff. In order to go ahead and give his customers something that will just go ahead and keep them coming and coming and coming, he gets his heroin directly from the source, which is Southeast Asia. And he begins to go ahead and get drugs from Southeast Asia in the middle of the Vietnam War. In order to obtain heroin from Asia, he was able to get in touch with U.S. Sergeant turned drug lord named Leslie Atkinson, who also went by Ike. Now, Ike was able to help Frank import his heroin to the U.S. and pretty much packaging heroin and importing it to the US does not seem like an easy task. There are rumors that when soldiers lost their lives, the drugs would be placed inside of their bodies, and I feel like that has to be the most disrespectful thing that you can do to a US soldier. They risk their lives, fighting for this country and all that stuff, and they have their bodies cut open to put drugs inside of them. Then you cut them open again to take drugs out. It just blows my mind. But again, that is only speculation. So once the drugs, to be specific, got to the US, he had to be classy with it. He wanted his drug to be known all throughout Harlem. So he gave his drug a brand name, basically, calling it Blue Magic. Frank and his family are living good off of drug money, which allows him to buy buildings, apartments, and ranches. As his success begins to grow, Frank not only has connections with high-profile criminals, but he also is able to have connections with those who were involved with entertainment and politics. For example, Frank would show up with his wife Julie at Madison Square Garden, where Muhammad Ali was facing Joe Frazier. And while he was showing up, he had on this very, very fancy fur coat and, had all these accessories on him. And, he looked like he was made out of money. But his appearance got the attention of the DEA. And if you are watching this and you do not know what the DEA is, it is the Drug Enforcement Administration. Keep this in mind, this is the 1970s, where the war on drugs was real. So Frank was stepping into dangerous ground here, getting the attention of the DEA. While the DEA have their eyes on Frank Lucas, trying to see if they can go ahead and bring him down, they are able to have this investigation, and during this investigation, they get a hold of someone in the mob named Anthony Venzino, who unknowingly spoke to a drug informant who told the informant about his mob connections, also naming Frank Lucas as one of those connections. After sharing this piece of information, the police were able to get a hold of Venzino, and he sang like a canary, pretty much telling the police everything he knew about Frank Lucas. The DEA are able to obtain all this information on Frank Lucas, so they begin to show up at his house late at night. And this is really different from the movie, because at his movie he was arrested at a church, but I mean, that's Hollywood for you. But instead, the police showed up to his house late at night with a warrant for his arrest. At first, the police can't really find anything in the house that could really make a conviction if he were to go to court with this. To ensure that the police wouldn't find anything, Frank's wife Julie would end up throwing money out of the window. You can call Julie a trap queen, a ride or die, because when the police showed up, she was like, no, you are not taking my man, and you are certainly not taking away the sort of life that I've grown accustomed to. She had this in mind. She was throwing out the money out of the window, but she might as well have just flushed all of the money down the toilet, because the police found the money, and pretty much after they found that Julie threw the money outside the window, it gives them reason to keep searching the house, where they found more money. Now the police do have something, and they are able to charge Frank with all of these drug dealings that he's been known to do. Not only is Frank arrested, but everyone in his organization were in handcuffs. Even his parents were in handcuffs. Now there's a trial put in place in 1975, and Frank ends up being convicted of his crimes, being sentenced to 70 years in prison. And this is the 1970s, and definitely 70 years has not passed, and Frank knew that it was going to be a long time, pretty much being sentenced to prison for the rest of his life. So he keeps this in mind while in prison, and he proceeds to do what crime lords usually don't do. Frank decided to snitch in order to get less prison time. Now he's able to go ahead and give the police all of this information of people who are doing all this illegal stuff. Now eventually he and his family were placed in witness protection in 1977. But in 1984, while Frank is free, he has this, opportunity to better himself. He would get arrested again. Once again, Frank was doing what he felt he did best by selling drugs, and got caught. But you would think that with his years of experience, he wouldn't try to get caught, but he ended up getting caught anyway. And he would be placed into prison again until he was released in 1991. Now I get that, he was able to make a deal with the police and everything, was able to get an earlier release, but he ended up going to prison anyway. But because after he was released, he still didn't really learn his lesson and got into prison again. So it's honestly, for me, in my opinion, I really don't think that he should have been released at all. He straight up took the lives of other people, whether they were bad people or not. He really took their lives, unjustly, basically. He just straight up murdered people for his own gain. And not only that, but the drugs that he sold were just so strong to the customers, or quote unquote customers. I try to go ahead and use that word loosely when it comes to buying drugs, but those drugs that he sold were just so strong, people ended up losing their lives because of it. And I just really feel when you are just responsible for so many deaths, then you should spend the rest of your life in prison, because the people who loved those who were, deceased are no longer, they can't get those people back. So for Frank to not spend the rest of his life in prison, it kind of feels like the people he, took out don't really get any justice at all. On May 30th of 2019, at the age of 88, Frank Lucas passed away. Before his death, Frank claims that he only sold drugs because that's all he knew to do, which is pretty much a sad excuse in my eyes. Like, I honestly get it. Like, I understand that, sometimes in the environment that you're in, the type of family life that you're in, you feel like something like selling drugs is your only option. But again, Frank did all of this work selling drugs and making this quote-unquote successful drug brand, but he couldn't put all of that hard work into something good. Most importantly, legal. Sure, I get that he had his struggles, but it's such a shame that he decided not to overcome those struggles and make an empire where people didn't have to lose their lives from addiction or other means. That's all I really have to share about Frank Lucas. Now, before I end this video, I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas. Now, as a born-again Christian, it doesn't seem right not to share the reason for the season. Now, I'm thankful that God sent his son Jesus Christ on earth to die for my sins. So since I repented of those sins and received Jesus Christ as my one and only Savior, I'll always be thankful that I received that free gift of salvation. I thank you all for taking the time in your day to watch this video. If you did like this video, please feel free to hit the like button. If you have any thoughts on this case, please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comment section below. If you'd like to see more videos from me, please feel free to subscribe and click the bell to be notified about the next video. If there's a certain true crime case that you'd like me to cover, go ahead and let me know. I will see y'all for the next True Crime Tuesdays, and I will talk to y'all later. Once again, have a very Merry Christmas.